Hello everyone, I am the Lore Explorer, and this video will contain spoilers for Outer Wilds Echoes of the Eye. In today's loop, I want to talk about the Owlks' mystical staffs and the amazing properties they seem to have. At first glance, the staffs may seem like a purely magical invention, but after having sat down and thought about it, I think they actually have a loose basis of reality in them. And it's actually a pretty interesting concept which could have implications elsewhere in the game as well. To start, we should probably just examine the staffs and their uses throughout the DLC. We can run into a handful of staffs that have been left behind by the Owlks. I call these ones messages. The ones that are active have green fire burning in a basin and are shining light out through the front end of the staff. When we step into this light, we immediately get the animation of the hatchling closing their four eyes. Yet once we do and we can't see anymore, a vision pops up in front of us for us to watch. But it doesn't put us to sleep or take complete control of us or anything. We're able to step away from the light anytime during these messages, and the visions immediately go away. So in short, the staff uses this mystical green light to pass on information to the person standing within that light. But that's just one side of the staffs. During our visit with the prisoner, we actually get to use them ourselves. And the button prompt to use the staff is what they're calling a projection. And when we hit that button to activate the staff, it projects a green light out from the back. But looking at it from the side, we can see that this light is actually scanning the hatchling up and down. When the prisoner uses the staff, the scan starts from the top of their head and reaches to about their shoulders. So it's not a full body scan, and it mostly focuses on the user's head. And right after the scan is complete, the green fire lights up in the basin, at which point the vision is ready to be passed on to whoever stands in the light on the opposite side. So at this point, we sort of know how they leave a message as well. They just get scanned and leave the staff lit, so anyone who walks into its projected light later has the vision of the message that they left behind. And we also know the staff somehow read the user's mind with light. And not only that, it's able to use light to project a vision into the mind or consciousness of another being. For instance, the prisoner is able to convey something to us, and we were able to depict the entire history of our solar system to the prisoner. In these two instances, the staff does lock us in place. We can't just walk away like with the messages, but I don't know if that is a mechanic of the staff or just a gameplay mechanic the developers added so people wouldn't have to rewatch them if they accidentally left the light. My guess would be the latter, but I digress. We do get to see the staffs used in other situations as well. The Owlks have converted the light technology of the staffs into a telescope version to study outer space. And in fact, the telescope with the light technology is the instrument the Owlks originally used to discover the eye signal. But really, it seems the telescopes work in much the same way as the staffs, except the only difference I see is it's not sending out light to scan anything like the staffs do, but rather it seems to be collecting and magnifying light that's coming from elsewhere, and most likely space. Then, it likely scans that magnified image you're reading, and at that point the base fire lights and the Owlk can look through the lens to see the light that will give them a vision. When the Owlk discovered the eye signal, the vision they received was simply the symbol for the eye of the universe, much the same reading the Nomai instruments and computers received when the vessel received the eye signal, which is actually just the design we can see in the quantum smoke around the eye if it were all lit up. But this makes me think that the telescope just gives a pretty accurate depiction of whatever is being scanned to the user. Now, excuse my tangent here, but previously we've only seen the staffs used to pass information between two conscious beings, and since the eye was the only target we've seen them actually use the telescope on, and since it's possible that the eye of the universe has a form of consciousness, it's possible that it's working almost identically to the staffs. But I'd argue that making a telescope to only search for conscious beings doesn't make much sense, and it's much more likely it's working like a normal telescope would. Plus, in this instant, the light is not being sent out to hit and scan the object like with the staff. The telescope seems to receive the eye signal out of the blue, which lit the basin and activated the vision. And after thinking about this is when it all started making a bit of sense to me, surprisingly. This made me think about visible light versus other wavelengths of light. In real life, the telescopes we send to space aren't usually looking at visible wavelengths. They are looking for things like radio waves or infrared wavelengths of light and so on. And even radio waves are technically just a wavelength of light. And we also use light in most of the instruments we use for scanning things on Earth. Like radar is just sending out radio waves to scan the sky and reading whether or not they hit something and bounce back. There's also methods of mapping planets' surfaces by using certain wavelengths of light to penetrate thick clouds or atmospheres. We can use this method to penetrate to the bottom of the ocean and map its floors, all through sending out certain wavelengths of light and looking at the return reading. And really, sound doesn't travel through the vacuum of space, so while they call the eye's signal a signal, which usually brings to mind a sound, in my understanding, it's really just a frequency or wavelength of light that we can pick up using a telescope, and the Nomai signal locators are just fancy telescopes reading certain wavelengths. So to me, it sort of seems like the Owlk staffs are doing much the same thing as all of these fancy scanners. It's sending out light to scan something and receiving information from that. So as of now, I imagine the staffs are essentially just fancy scanners, and the light they use somehow encompasses every possible wavelength in existence. And it's almost a confirmed fact that the Owlks indeed do know all of the wavelengths in existence because they have a near perfect cloaking device that would have to both read and prevent every wavelength from passing through, and it would also have to emit them from the opposite side for everyone to think that they are seeing what's behind the cloaking device. And I'm not sure how you'd be able to do that if you haven't registered and known all of these signals. And to me, it seems like one of these wavelengths or signals in the Outer Wilds universe seems to be our brain waves or even a form of our consciousness wave. Now, in real life, we measure brain waves through electrical activity in the brain, but it's not too crazy to imagine that this may emit some wavelength of invisible light as well. In other words, I think in the Outer Wilds universe, the activity in our brain or even consciousness sends out a certain wavelength that the staffs can read and overwrite. And something we see in game could be a tiny bit of evidence for this. When we watch the Owlks testing the artifacts, we get to see some brain scans of the Owlks. Before they light their artifact and go to sleep, the readings are spiky on the monitor. But once the artifact lights and the Owlk does go to sleep, they start to round out and even turn a different color on the monitor, and even their whole brain turns green. And I don't think this is simply to just show the Owlks went to sleep. That was depicted by them closing their eyes. To me, this seems to imply that there is a direct connection between the light from the artifact and base fires and the Owlk's brainwaves. The interesting thing here is, if our brain or consciousness even, which we know to be a pretty meaningful thing in Outer Wilds, actually does emit a readable wavelength of invisible light, then this actually gives us the mechanism in which the Nomai statues could record our memories as well. And it suddenly makes sense that someone has to be the closest to the statue. The statue reads the unique wavelength of the closest conscious being, and from then on out, it only records and connects to that wavelength. And it gives the statue a way to implant those memories into our dream as well. Plus, there has to be some mechanism in which the quantum objects in the game can sense consciousness, for lack of a better term, and collapse to a single possibility if looked at. And to me, this mechanism makes sense. Mostly because consciousness seems to be such a huge focus throughout the entire game, and also because the Owlks seem to be a master of light in every aspect. I mean, it's how they travel, it's how they communicate, they use it to hide things, they use it to activate their mechanical utilities, they just seem to have it mastered. But I see no reason for that to stop at only visible wavelengths of light. And in the Outer Wilds universe, it's not too far of a stretch to think consciousness, or even your brain, emits some wavelength of non-visible light that's readable. But I could be completely off on this one. Hopefully it makes sense to everybody else as well. Of course, if you like the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like it. And if you want to support the channel more directly, you can use a super thank feature or sign up to become a member below. Members get perks like badges next to their name, special emojis in the comments, and access to my backlog of live streams, so it's a cool way to support the channel and get something in return. And, as usual, a huge shout out to the members here on the channel. I really appreciate the support, and I hope your names all appreciate their sweet, sweet screen time. And as always, this is a lore explorer diving deep into the concepts so you don't have to.